Owen Lancaster pressed the worn pencil to paper for the seventh time that evening, his calloused fingers trembling slightly as he composed the advertisement that would change his life forever. The kerosene lamp flickered in his small Montana cabin, casting dancing shadows across words he had written and crossed out repeatedly, trying to find the right way to ask a stranger to share his lonely existence on the windswept prairie near Mineral Park. It was March of 1884, and Owen had been working his homestead claim for 3 brutal years. At 26, he had built a sturdy cabin, fenced 40 acres, and established a small herd of cattle that was finally beginning to thrive. What he did not have was another human soul within 10 miles, and the isolation had begun to wear on him like water on stone. He had tried to convince himself that the work was enough, that building something from nothing would fill the hollow place in his chest. But every night when he returned to his empty cabin, the silence became more oppressive. The advertisement he finally settled on was simple and honest. He described his land, his prospects, and his need for a wife who could handle the hardships of frontier life. He promised to be a good husband, to work hard, and to treat any woman who came with respect and kindness. Owen folded the paper carefully and sealed it in an envelope addressed to the Rocky Mountain News in Denver, along with $3 precious for the posting. 6 weeks later, Owen rode into Mineral Park to collect supplies and check for mail at the general store. The town consisted of little more than a dozen buildings clustered along the dusty main street, but it was the only civilization for miles. Harrison Winters, the storekeeper and postmaster, handed Owen a small bundle of letters with a knowing grin. "Got yourself some responses to that advertisement, did you?" Harrison asked, his eyes twinkling with curiosity. Owen felt heat rise to his weathered face as he accepted the letters. "That is my business, Harrison." "Sure is. Good luck to you, son. This territory needs more good families." Back at his cabin, Owen spread the 5 letters across his rough-hewn table. 3 of them were brief and perfunctory, listing qualifications as if applying for a job as a schoolteacher. One was written in such flowery language that Owen suspected the woman had copied it from a romance novel. But the 5th letter made him pause and read it 3 times. The handwriting was neat but unpretentious, and the words spoke directly to him. Penelope Bradford wrote from Kansas City, where she worked as a seamstress after both her parents had died from influenza the previous winter. She was 23 years old and found herself alone in a city that had grown too expensive and too lonely. She did not claim to be a great beauty or promise to be perfect. Instead, she wrote honestly about her fear of the unknown and her hope that a hard life shared might be better than an easy life lived alone. "I can cook plain food well enough," she had written. "I can sew and mend, tend a garden, and I am not afraid of hard work. I have been told I have a quick temper when provoked, so I think it only fair to warn you of that. But I am also loyal, and once I give my word, I keep it. If you are willing to take a chance on me, I am willing to take a chance on you in Montana." Owen wrote back that same evening, his heart hammering in his chest like a blacksmith's hammer. He told her more about the land, the isolation, the brutal winters and scorching summers. He wanted her to understand exactly what she would be facing. He also told her about the mountains he could see from his porch at sunrise, the sound of the creek that ran through his property, and the way the stars looked at night without city lights to dim them. He sent her money for the train fare and told her he would meet her in Helena in 3 weeks if she was still willing to come. The days crawled by with agonizing slowness. Owen found himself working with renewed energy, repairing everything that needed fixing, whitewashing the cabin walls, and even building a small bookshelf from some precious lumber he had been saving. He caught himself whistling while he worked, something he had not done in years. On the appointed day, Owen rode the 35 miles to Helena, arriving a full day early. He had borrowed a wagon from his nearest neighbor, promising to help with spring planting in exchange. He spent the night in a boarding house, barely sleeping, and was at the train station 2 hours before the scheduled arrival. The train pulled in with a great hiss of steam and squealing of brakes. Owen stood on the platform, his best shirt pressed, and his hair still damp from the bath he had taken that morning. Passengers began to disembark, and Owen searched each face anxiously. Then he saw her. Penelope Bradford stepped down from the train car with a worn carpetbag in one hand and a small trunk being lowered by the porter behind her. She wore a simple gray traveling dress and a modest bonnet, but it was her eyes that caught Owen's attention. They were a striking green, and they swept across the platform with an expression of determined courage mixed with barely concealed terror. Owen stepped forward, removing his hat. "Miss Bradford," she turned to him, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. Owen saw a woman of medium height with auburn hair visible beneath her bonnet, a dusting of freckles across her nose, and a mouth set in a firm line that he suspected was to keep it from trembling. She saw a tall man, lean from hard work, with brown hair sun-bleached at the temples and blue eyes that held both kindness and apprehension. "Mr. Lancaster?" she asked, her voice softer than he had expected. "Yes, madam. I am Owen Lancaster. Welcome to Montana Territory." Penelope's shoulders relaxed slightly. "I am pleased to meet you in person. Thank you for the train fare. Of course. Let me get your trunk." Owen hefted the small trunk easily, noting how light it was. Everything she owned in the world, he realized, fit into one small trunk and a carpetbag. The thought humbled him. They walked to the wagon in awkward silence. Owen helped Penelope up onto the seat, then climbed up beside her. As they pulled away from the station, he cleared his throat. "I thought we might stay here in Helena tonight, separate rooms at the boarding house, and then see the minister in the morning if that suits you. Give you a chance to rest from the journey and to be sure you want to go through with this." Penelope looked at him with surprise and something that might have been gratitude. "That is very considerate. I confess the journey has been exhausting. How long were you traveling?" "For days. The train was delayed twice by track repairs." She paused, then added quietly, "I had plenty of time to think about turning back." "But you did not." "No, I did not." She turned to look at him directly. "Did you consider not coming to meet me?" Owen appreciated her directness. "No, madam, I gave my word and I keep it. But I will tell you now, if you have changed your mind, I will give you money to return to Kansas City. No hard feelings, no obligation. That is generous of you." Penelope fell silent for a moment, watching the streets of Helena pass by. "May I ask you something?" "Of course." "In your letter, you mentioned that you had been alone on your homestead for 3 years. Why did you wait so long to seek a wife?" Owen considered the question carefully. "I wanted to be sure I could provide properly. The first year was just surviving. The second year was proving up the claim and getting the cattle started. This past winter, I realized I had built something worth sharing, but there was no one to share it with. It seemed foolish to have worked so hard for something I could only enjoy alone." Penelope nodded slowly. "That makes sense. I appreciate your honesty." They settled into the boarding house and Owen showed Penelope to her room. "I will be just down the hall. If you need anything, please let the proprietress know. Dinner is served at 6 in the dining room if you are hungry." "Thank you." Penelope hesitated at her door. "Owen, may I call you Owen? Please do. I am still willing to go through with this if you are. I just wanted you to know." Owen felt a warm rush of relief and something else he could not quite name. "I am glad to hear it, Penelope. Get some rest." The next morning, they stood before Reverend Thompson in the small Methodist church. Penelope wore the same gray dress, but she had pinned a small spray of wildflowers Owen had purchased from a street vendor to her bodice. Owen wore his Sunday best and tried to keep his hands from shaking as he repeated the vows. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, Owen leaned in to give Penelope a chaste kiss on the cheek. She turned her head at the last moment, and their lips met briefly. Owen felt electricity run through him at that simple contact. They had lunch at a restaurant, a luxury Owen rarely allowed himself, and then began the long journey to the homestead. Penelope sat beside him on the wagon seat, her hands folded in her lap, as the city gave way to open country. "Tell me about the land," she said after they had been traveling for an hour. Owen felt himself relax as he talked about the homestead. He described the cabin, the creek, the pastures where the cattle grazed, and the stand of timber that had provided logs for building. He told her about the difficulties of the first winter, when he had nearly lost everything to the cold, and the joy of seeing the first calf born on his land. Penelope listened intently, asking questions that showed she was trying to understand what her new life would entail. "You mentioned a vegetable garden in your letter. Is there already one planted?" "There is a plot fenced off and the soil turned, but I did not plant this year. I was not sure if you would come, and I did not want to waste seeds. I have been living mostly on meat, beans, and whatever root vegetables I could keep from last fall. Then we should order seeds as soon as possible. It is still early enough in the season to get a good crop if we are quick about it." The way she said, "we" made Owen's chest tighten with an unfamiliar emotion. For 3 years, every decision and every burden had been his alone. Now, suddenly, there was a "we." They reached the homestead as the sun was beginning to set. Owen helped Penelope down from the wagon and watched anxiously as she surveyed her new home. The cabin was small but well built, with a stone chimney and real glass windows that Owen had hauled all the way from Helena the previous year. The barn and corral were sturdy and the fences were in good repair. "It is beautiful," Penelope said softly. Owen laughed in surprise. "It is small and rough, nowhere near beautiful. No, look." She pointed to the west, where the setting sun painted the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "You were right about the view. I have never seen anything like it." Owen looked at the mountains he saw every day with fresh eyes. "I suppose I have gotten used to it, but you are right. It is beautiful." He carried her trunk inside and showed her the cabin. It was a single large room with a stone fireplace at one end and his bed at the other. There was a table with 2 chairs, the new bookshelf, a cast iron stove, and various hooks and shelves for storage. Owen suddenly saw how sparse it was, how lacking in any comfort or decoration. "I will sleep in the barn tonight," he said quickly. "Give you privacy to settle in. Tomorrow I can start building a partition to give us separate spaces until you are comfortable with sharing quarters." Penelope turned to him, her expression serious. "Owen, we are married. I will not ask you to sleep in your own barn. If you want to build a partition for propriety's sake, that is fine, but I would prefer you stay in your own home. I do not want you to feel pressured. I appreciate that, but I knew what I was agreeing to when I got on that train. I am your wife now, and while I hope we can grow to know each other better, I will not turn you out of your own bed." They worked out a compromise. Owen strung a blanket across the room to give Penelope privacy while she changed. They shared a simple dinner of beans and cornbread that Owen had prepared, and then sat awkwardly at the table, both unsure what to say. Finally, Penelope broke the silence. "Would you tell me about yourself? Beyond the homestead, I mean. Where did you grow up?" Owen found himself talking more than he had in years. He told her about growing up in Ohio, the youngest of 4 brothers. His family had been farmers, but with 3 older brothers, there would be nothing for him to inherit. When he turned 21, he had headed west to make his own way. He had worked as a ranch hand, a freight driver, and even briefly as a deputy sheriff before settling on homesteading. "What about you?" he asked when his stories ran dry. "Your letter mentioned your parents died last winter." Penelope's face clouded with grief that was still fresh. "They both fell ill within days of each other. The doctor said it was influenza. They died within a week, first my mother, then my father. I think he lost the will to fight once she was gone. They had been married for 28 years and were rarely apart. I am sorry for your loss." "Thank you. After they died, I realized I had no real ties to Kansas City. We had no other family, and the friends we had could not help support me. I was barely making enough with my sewing to pay for a room and food. When I saw your advertisement, it felt like a sign. A chance to start fresh somewhere new. I am glad you saw it." Penelope smiled, and Owen realized it was the first genuine smile he had seen from her. It transformed her face, making her eyes light up. "So am I." That night they lay on opposite sides of the bed, careful not to touch. Owen stared at the ceiling, acutely aware of Penelope's breathing beside him. He had thought the loneliness was the hardest thing about homesteading, but now he realized there was something even harder. Having someone so close and not knowing if she truly wanted to be there, or was simply making the best of a difficult situation. The next morning, Owen woke before dawn as usual. He dressed quietly and went out to tend the cattle and horses. When he returned, Penelope had breakfast waiting. The beans were seasoned better than anything he had made in 3 years, and the coffee was strong and hot. "I looked at the garden plot while you were working," Penelope said as they ate. "The soil looks good. We should make a list of seeds to order." They spent the morning doing just that, planning the garden together. Owen was surprised by how much Penelope knew about growing vegetables. Her mother had kept an extensive garden in Kansas City, and Penelope had worked it with her every year. In the afternoon, Owen showed Penelope around the property. She asked intelligent questions about the cattle, the water source, and the layout of the land. When they reached the creek, she stopped and took a deep breath. "The air is so clean here, and the quiet. In the city there was always noise day and night. I had forgotten what real quiet sounded like." "Does it bother you, the isolation?" Penelope considered the question. "Ask me again in 6 months. Right now it feels peaceful, but I imagine it might feel different when winter comes and we are snowed in." "That is honest. I promised myself I would be honest with you. You have been honest with me." Over the next few weeks, they fell into a routine. Owen worked the land and tended the cattle while Penelope managed the household and started the garden. The seed order arrived, and Penelope spent long hours planting and watering. Owen built a chicken coop, and they purchased 6 hens from a farmer near Mineral Park. Fresh eggs became a regular part of their meals. In the evenings, they would sit together at the table and talk. Sometimes, Owen would read aloud from one of the 3 books he owned: a Bible, a collection of Shakespeare's plays, and a farming manual. Other times, Penelope would tell stories about her childhood or teach Owen songs her mother had taught her. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the awkwardness between them began to fade. They learned each other's habits and preferences. Owen discovered that Penelope liked her coffee sweet and was not a morning person. Penelope learned that Owen was always hungry but too polite to ask for seconds, so she started serving him larger portions. The partition Owen had built came down after a month. It had become more of an obstacle than a privacy measure, and one evening Penelope simply asked if they could remove it. They worked together to take it down, and that night, when they lay down to sleep, Owen gathered his courage and took Penelope's hand. She squeezed back, and he heard her whisper in the darkness, "I am glad I came, Owen. I am glad you did too." Summer arrived in full force, bringing long days of work and short, warm nights. The garden flourished under Penelope's care, and she proved to have a gift for making things grow. She also began to make the cabin feel more like a home. She sewed curtains from fabric she ordered from Helena and made cushions for the chairs. She planted flowers near the door, which Owen had thought frivolous, until he saw how they made Penelope smile every time she looked at them. In July, Owen had to make a trip to Mineral Park for supplies. Penelope insisted on coming with him, eager to see the small town and meet some of their few neighbors. Harrison Winters greeted them warmly and introduced Penelope to his wife, Martha. Martha Winters was a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s who immediately took Penelope under her wing. "You must come to the ladies' circle next month," Martha insisted. "We meet on the third Sunday. There are only 8 of us, but we have a nice time. It gets lonely out here, and it is good to have female company." Penelope accepted eagerly, and Owen watched her chat with Martha with a mixture of relief and something else. He realized with a start that it was pride. He was proud of his wife, of how she had adapted to this hard life, and of how she was making connections in their small community. On the ride back, Penelope was more talkative than usual. "Martha invited us to dinner next month. I told her we would come. I hope that is all right." "Of course it is. I should have thought to introduce you to more people sooner. You have been busy. We both have. But I would like to have friends here to feel like we are part of a community and not just isolated on our own." "I understand. I have been alone so long, I forgot what it is like to be part of something larger." Penelope looked at him thoughtfully. "You are not alone anymore, Owen." "No, I am not." He took a breath and added, "I have been meaning to tell you something. I know this marriage started as a practical arrangement, a solution to both our problems. But I want you to know that I have come to care for you deeply. You have made this place into a real home, and I cannot imagine going back to how it was before you came." Penelope was quiet for a long moment, and Owen worried he had said too much. Then she reached over and took his hand. "I care for you too, more than I expected to. When I first arrived, I was so frightened. I thought I had made a terrible mistake. But you have been kind and patient, and you have never made me feel like I was just a convenience. I am happy here, Owen, happier than I have been in a long time." Owen lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Then I am the luckiest man in Montana." That night, their marriage became a true one in every sense. It was tender and careful, both of them nervous despite being wed for months. Afterward, Penelope lay with her head on Owen's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I love you," she whispered. Owen tightened his arms around her. "I love you too. I think I have for a while now, but I was afraid to say it." "Why afraid?" "Because I was afraid you did not feel the same, that you were just making the best of the situation." Penelope propped herself up on one elbow to look at him in the moonlight streaming through the window. "Owen Lancaster, I chose to get on that train. I chose to marry you, and I choose to be here now. You may have advertised for a wife, but what you got was a woman who loves you." Owen pulled her down for a kiss that left them both breathless. "Then I got far more than I deserved." August brought news that changed everything. Penelope had been feeling unwell for a few days, and Martha Winters, visiting for the ladies' circle meeting, pulled her aside for a private conversation. When the ladies left, Penelope found Owen in the barn and told him the news with tears streaming down her face. "I am pregnant," she said. "Martha helped me count back, and she thinks the baby will come in late February or early March." Owen stood frozen for a moment, then let out a whoop of joy that startled the horses. He picked Penelope up and spun her around, then immediately set her down again carefully. "I am sorry. I should not have done that. Are you all right? Should you be resting?" Penelope laughed through her tears. "I am fine. Martha says I am healthy and should be able to continue with my normal work for several more months. But Owen, are you happy about this?" "Happy, Penelope, I am overjoyed. We are going to have a baby, a family." His voice broke on the last word. They held each other in the barn, the smell of hay and horses around them, and Owen felt something settle in his chest that he had not even known was missing. Not just a wife to share his work and his bed, but a true family. Children who would grow up on this land he had claimed, who would make it truly home. The pregnancy changed their routine somewhat. Owen became fiercely protective, taking on tasks that Penelope had been doing and refusing to let her lift anything heavy. Penelope tolerated this for about a week before putting her foot down. "Owen, I am pregnant, not made of glass. Martha has had 6 children and worked right up until her labor with each one. I will be fine. But what if something happens? Then we will deal with it together. But you cannot wrap me in cotton and expect me to sit still for 6 months. I will go mad." They compromised. Penelope continued her work, but agreed to let Owen handle the heavier chores. The garden continued to thrive, and they spent long evenings preserving vegetables for the winter. Penelope proved to be skilled at canning and pickling, and the shelves in the cabin began to fill with jars of beans, tomatoes, pickles, and preserves. In September, the first real crisis struck. Owen was out checking on the cattle when he discovered that several head were missing. He spent the day tracking and found where someone had deliberately cut the fence and driven the cattle away. He followed the trail until it was too dark to continue safely, then rode back to the cabin, his jaw set with anger. Penelope took one look at his face and sat him down, putting hot coffee in his hands. "What happened?" Owen explained about the missing cattle, trying to keep his voice calm. "I am going into Mineral Park tomorrow to report it to the sheriff. Then I am going to track them properly and get them back." "How many were taken?" 8 head. "That is nearly a quarter of my herd, Penelope. If I do not get them back, it will be a hard winter." Penelope's face was pale but determined. "Then you will get them back, but please, please be careful. Cattle can be replaced. You cannot." The next day, Owen rode into Mineral Park and found the sheriff, a grizzled man named Tom Brennan. Tom listened to Owen's report and nodded grimly. "There has been a group working this area, stealing cattle and horses. We have been trying to catch them for months. Can you track them?" "I can try. I will send my deputy with you. 2 guns are better than 1. Owen returned home to gather supplies. Penelope packed food and checked his ammunition with the same care she used for everything else. "Promise me you will come back," she said as he prepared to leave. "I promise. I am not leaving you and our child, but I have to do this, Penelope. Those cattle are our future." "I know. Just remember that you are our future too." Owen and the deputy, a young man named Carl Moss, tracked the stolen cattle for 2 days. They found the rustlers' camp in a narrow canyon about 20 miles from Owen's homestead. There were 3 men, all rough-looking characters, with a small herd of cattle from various brands. The confrontation was brief and tense. Carl and Owen approached with guns drawn and demanded the return of the stolen cattle. One of the rustlers went for his weapon, and shots were fired. When the smoke cleared, 1 rustler was dead, 1 was wounded, and the 3rd had his hands up in surrender. Owen found his cattle among the herd and drove them back toward his homestead, while Carl took the 2 surviving rustlers to jail in Mineral Park. It took another full day to get the cattle home, and by the time Owen rode up to the cabin, he was exhausted, dirty, and still shaking from the violence. Penelope ran out to meet him, and Owen nearly fell off his horse into her arms. She helped him inside, heated water for a bath, and fed him while he told her everything that had happened. He left out the worst details about the shooting, but he could see in her eyes that she understood. "You are safe," she said finally. "That is all that matters to me. I am safe and we have our cattle back. But Penelope, I killed a man today. I shot him because he was going to shoot Carl and it was the right thing to do, but I killed him." Penelope held him while he shook, stroking his hair and murmuring comfort. "You protected what was yours and saved the deputy's life. You did what you had to do. This is a hard land, and sometimes it demands hard choices." That night, Owen held Penelope close, feeling the slight swell of her belly where their child grew. Life and death, all mixed together in this wild territory. He had built something here, something worth protecting, and he would do whatever it took to keep it safe. October brought the first frost and the urgent need to prepare for winter. Owen and Penelope worked from dawn to dusk, stacking firewood, reinforcing the barn, and making sure everything was secure. The garden had produced abundantly, and Penelope had canned and preserved enough to see them through even a harsh winter. They made another trip to Mineral Park for final supplies before the snow came. Penelope was beginning to show noticeably now, and Martha Winters fussed over her like a mother hen. "You make sure you have everything you need," Martha insisted. "Once the snow comes, you could be stuck at that homestead for months. If you have any trouble with the baby, you send Owen for me immediately. I have helped birth more babies than I can count." They loaded the wagon with flour, sugar, coffee, and other staples. Owen also purchased fabric for baby clothes and blankets, watching Penelope's face light up with each practical gift. On the way home, Penelope rested her head on Owen's shoulder. "I am not afraid of the winter anymore. I thought I would be, but I am not. We have everything we need, and we have each other. You have gotten brave, Mrs. Lancaster, or maybe I have just learned that there are things worth being brave for." The first snow came in early November, a light dusting that melted by afternoon, but they both knew it was just a warning. The real snow would come soon, and it would stay. They spent the long evenings making preparations for the baby. Penelope sewed tiny gowns and blankets while Owen built a cradle from wood he had been saving for something special. He carved flowers into the headboard, working carefully by lamplight while Penelope watched. "You have a talent for that," she said as he worked. "My oldest brother was a carpenter. He taught me some when I was young. Our children will be lucky to have a father who can build things." "Children. How many are you planning on?" Penelope laughed. "I have not decided yet. Ask me again after this one is born." The heavy snows came in late November, and by December they were truly isolated. Owen had to dig paths from the cabin to the barn every morning, and the cattle huddled together for warmth. But inside the cabin, life was cozy and warm. Christmas arrived, and although they had no way to go to church or visit neighbors, they made it special. Owen had secretly carved a set of wooden animals for Penelope, including a tiny horse for the baby. Penelope had knitted him a warm scarf and mittens from yarn she had ordered months before. They read the Christmas story from the Bible and sang carols together, Penelope's clear voice blending with Owen's deeper one. "This is the best Christmas I have ever had," Penelope said as they lay in bed that night, her back against Owen's chest and his hand resting on her belly. "Better than when you were a child, different. When I was a child, Christmas was about receiving. Now it is about giving, about sharing this with you and knowing that next Christmas we will have our baby to celebrate with us." January brought brutally cold weather and heavy snow. Owen worried constantly about the cattle and about Penelope, who was growing large with the baby and moving more slowly. But she remained cheerful and busy, always finding something to do despite his insistence that she rest. "I will have plenty of time to rest after the baby comes," she told him when he fussed. "Right now, I am still perfectly capable of cooking dinner and mending your shirts." In February, Penelope woke Owen in the middle of the night. "The baby is coming." Owen bolted upright, heart racing. "Now." But Martha said it would not be until March. Babies do not always follow schedules. The pains started a few hours ago, and they are getting closer together. Owen fought down panic. The snow was deep, and it would take hours to reach Mineral Park and bring back Martha, even if he could make it through the drifts. "What do we need to do?" Penelope, remarkably calm considering the circumstances, walked him through the preparations. "There is a book on the shelf that Martha lent me. It has a chapter on childbirth. You need to read it now and follow the instructions." Owen had faced cattle rustlers and brutal winters, but nothing had prepared him for the terror of helping his wife give birth. He read the chapter 3 times, his hands shaking, then boiled water and gathered clean linens as instructed. The labor lasted through the night and into the morning. Owen held Penelope's hand, wiped her face with cool cloths, and tried to be brave even though he was terrified. Penelope was incredible, breathing through the pains and even managing to reassure him between contractions. "You are doing fine," she told him at one point. "Just stay calm. I am supposed to be reassuring you, not the other way around. Then we are both doing our best." Finally, as the sun rose on a clear February morning, their son came into the world with a loud, healthy cry. Owen, following the instructions from Martha's book, carefully tied off and cut the cord, then wrapped the baby in a clean blanket and placed him in Penelope's arms. Tears streamed down Owen's face as he looked at his wife and son. "You are amazing. He is perfect. You are both perfect." Penelope was pale and exhausted, but she smiled as she looked at their baby. "He has your eyes. Look, they are blue. All babies have blue eyes at first." "These are your eyes, I know it." She looked up at Owen. "We need to name him. I was thinking Tobias after my father, Tobias Lancaster. Tobias is a good, strong name. Hello, Tobias. Welcome to Montana." The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and learning to care for an infant. Tobias was a healthy baby with strong lungs, and he made his needs known loudly. Owen discovered muscles he had never used before from walking the floor with a crying baby at 3 in the morning, but he also discovered a depth of love he had not known existed. Watching Penelope nurse their son, seeing Tobias's tiny fingers wrap around his own, hearing his small coos and gurgles, all of it filled Owen with a fierce protectiveness and joy. When the snow finally melted enough for travel in late March, Martha Winters was the first to visit. She examined Penelope and Tobias thoroughly, then pronounced them both healthy and thriving. "You did well, Owen Lancaster," Martha told him. "Many men would have panicked, but you kept your head. This little one is lucky to have you both." Spring arrived with its usual rush of work. The cattle had survived the winter, and new calves were being born. The garden needed to be planted again, and 100 other tasks demanded attention. But now everything was different because they had Tobias. Owen built a sling that Penelope could use to carry Tobias while she worked in the garden. He would wake from sleep to find Penelope nursing the baby in the rocking chair Owen had built, the lamplight making them both glow. These small moments of domesticity filled him with contentment he had never imagined possible. In May, they made their first trip as a family to Mineral Park. Tobias was admired by everyone they met, and Owen found himself puffed up with pride at his son and his wife. Harrison Winters grinned at him across the counter of the general store. "Never seen you look so happy, Owen. Fatherhood agrees with you." "It does. So does marriage. I advertised for a wife who could handle the hard work and the isolation. What I got was a woman who exceeded every hope I had. That evening they had dinner with the Winters family. Martha had made a feast, and they sat around the table with other families from the area, sharing food and conversation. Tobias was passed from lap to lap, cooed over and admired. On the ride home, Penelope nursed Tobias while Owen drove the wagon. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in gold and purple, just as it had the first time Penelope had seen them. "You remember the first time I saw this view?" Penelope asked. "I told you it was beautiful." "I remember." "I thought you were just being polite." "I was not. It took my breath away then, and it still does now." She looked down at Tobias, then over at Owen. "But the view is not the most beautiful thing I found here." "What is?" "This. Us. A family and a home and a life worth living. When I got on that train in Kansas City, I was running away from loneliness and poverty. I did not expect to find love." Owen reached over and took her hand. "Neither did I. I thought I was just looking for help with the work, someone to share the burden, but you gave me so much more than that. You gave me a reason for all of it." Summer brought more work and more joy. Tobias grew quickly, and by his 6-month mark, he was a chubby, happy baby who laughed at everything his father did. Owen discovered he could make silly faces that sent Tobias into peals of giggles, and he found himself doing it constantly just to hear that sound. The homestead continued to prosper. The cattle herd was growing, the garden was abundant, and Owen had even managed to plant a small orchard of apple and cherry trees that would bear fruit in a few years. Every improvement was made with the future in mind, with thoughts of Tobias growing up here and perhaps brothers or sisters to join him. In August, a traveling preacher came through Mineral Park holding a revival. Owen and Penelope attended with Tobias, and the preacher asked if anyone wanted their children baptized. Owen looked at Penelope, and she nodded. They stood before the congregation while the preacher blessed Tobias with water from the creek that ran through Owen's land. "This child is being raised on land his father claimed from the wilderness," the preacher said. "May he grow strong and faithful, a blessing to his family and his community. May he carry on the work his parents have begun here, building something lasting in this wild territory." That night, lying in bed with Penelope in his arms and Tobias sleeping in his cradle nearby, Owen thought about everything that had changed in the past year and a half. He had been so lonely, so desperate for companionship, that he had placed an advertisement for a wife as if ordering goods from a catalog. What he had received instead was a partner, a lover, a mother for his children and his dearest friend. Penelope had taken his rough cabin and made it a home. She had taken his isolated existence and filled it with love and laughter. She had given him a son and the hope of more children to come. "What are you thinking about?" Penelope asked sleepily. "How lucky I am. How that advertisement was the smartest thing I ever did. Or how I was smart enough to answer it. That too," he kissed her forehead. "I love you, Penelope Lancaster, more than I have words to say." "I love you too, Owen. Thank you for bringing me here, for giving me this life. Thank you for coming. For taking a chance on a lonely homesteader in the middle of nowhere." "It is not the middle of nowhere. It is home." Fall arrived with its usual beauty and work. The harvest was good, and they spent long days preserving food for the winter. Tobias had begun to crawl, getting into everything and requiring constant supervision. Owen built a playpen to keep him safe while Penelope worked, but Tobias was not happy about the confinement and made his displeasure known. In October, Penelope told Owen she was pregnant again. This time there was no surprise, just quiet joy. They were ready for another child, and Tobias would be a little over a year old when the new baby arrived. "Boy or girl, what are you hoping for?" Owen asked. Healthy. That is all I hope for, but a little girl would be nice to even things out. I think I would like a daughter, a little girl with your red hair and green eyes, or your blue eyes and stubbornness. I am not stubborn. Penelope raised an eyebrow. Owen Lancaster, you once spent an entire day trying to move a boulder that was in the wrong spot rather than just plow around it. I got it moved, did I not? After enlisting help from 3 neighbors and nearly giving yourself a hernia. That is stubborn. Owen pulled her close. Fine, I am stubborn. But you are the one who agreed to marry a stranger and move to Montana, so you must be a little stubborn too. I prefer to think of it as determined. The second winter was easier than the first had been. They knew what to expect and they were prepared. The cabin was warm and well stocked, and Tobias kept them entertained with his antics. He had learned to pull himself up on furniture and was beginning to take tentative steps. Christmas was a loud, joyful affair. Tobias was old enough to be excited by the fuss, even if he did not understand what was happening. Owen had carved him a set of wooden blocks, and Tobias spent hours stacking them and knocking them down, laughing each time they fell. January and February passed with the usual cold and snow. Penelope grew large with the baby, and this time they were prepared for an early arrival. Martha had stocked them with supplies and detailed instructions, though she made Owen promise to send for her if there was any way to get through. In early March, when the snow was beginning to melt but travel was still difficult, Penelope went into labor again. This time Owen was less panicked, though still anxious. The labor was shorter than with Tobias, and by evening they had a daughter. She was tiny and perfect, with a dusting of red hair and eyes that Owen insisted were green even though Penelope said it was too soon to tell. They named her Lily Rose after both their mothers. Tobias was fascinated by his baby sister. He would stand by her cradle and babble at her, and when she was awake, he would try to give her his toys. Owen's heart swelled watching his son be gentle with his sister. We have a family, Penelope said one evening, holding Lily while Tobias played at their feet. A real, proper family. We do. And I fall in love with you more every day, watching you with our children. Even when I am covered in spit up and have not slept in 3 days, especially then. You are beautiful, Penelope, the most beautiful thing in my life. Spring brought new life to the homestead. The cattle herd continued to grow, and Owen hired a young man from Mineral Park to help with the extra work. Tobias began to walk in earnest, toddling around the cabin and the yard, investigating everything. Lily grew from a tiny infant to a chubby baby with a ready smile. In June, they celebrated Tobias's first birthday with a party that included the Winters family and several other neighbors. It was a warm, sunny day, and they set up tables outside. The women brought food, and the children played while the adults talked. Harrison Winters pulled Owen aside at one point. You have built something special here, Owen, not just the homestead, but the family. You should be proud. I am. And it all started with that advertisement. I still cannot believe my luck that Penelope answered it. It was not just luck. You were honest in what you were offering and what you needed, and she was brave enough to take a chance. That is a good foundation for anything. That summer, Owen taught Tobias to feed the chickens. The little boy would carefully scatter feed while the hens clucked around his feet. He was fearless with the animals, and Owen could already see that he would be a natural with livestock. Penelope planted flowers around the cabin again, and this year she added roses. Something beautiful to look at while we work, she explained. And when the children are grown, they will remember the roses their mother planted. In August, a photographer came through Mineral Park, and Owen insisted they have a family portrait made. They dressed in their best clothes and rode into town. The photographer posed them carefully. Owen standing tall with his hand on Penelope's shoulder, Penelope seated with Lily in her arms, and Tobias standing beside his mother. When the photograph arrived a few weeks later, Owen stared at it in wonder. Here was proof of everything he had built. A strong, healthy family, looking prosperous and content. He had the photograph framed and hung it over the fireplace. Fall brought the usual harvest work, but it also brought news that made Owen's heart leap. A new town was being established just 8 miles from their homestead. It would have a school, a church, and shops. Civilization was coming to their part of Montana. "What do you think?" Owen asked Penelope when he heard the news. "Will you miss the isolation?" "Not even a little bit," Penelope laughed. "I love our home, but having a school nearby for the children and a church where we can worship regularly would be wonderful. And other women to talk to more than once a month." The years passed with the rhythm of farm life. Tobias grew into a sturdy little boy who followed his father everywhere, learning to rope and ride almost before he could write his name. Lily was a daddy's girl who could wrap Owen around her little finger with a smile. In 1888, when Tobias was 4 and Lily was 2, Penelope gave birth to twin boys. The pregnancy had been difficult, and the birth was hard, but both babies were healthy. They named them Matthew and Mark. "We may need to build an addition to the cabin," Owen joked, looking at their 4 children with wonder. "We definitely need to build an addition," Penelope said. "These boys are going to need their own room once they are old enough." Owen did build the addition that summer, adding 2 more rooms to the cabin. One became a bedroom for the children, with bunks for the boys and a small bed for Lily. The other became a proper parlor, with the new furniture Owen had ordered from Helena. The homestead had grown significantly. Owen now had over 100 head of cattle and had claimed additional land. He employed 2 ranch hands year-round and hired additional help during branding and roundup. The small operation he had started alone had become a thriving ranch. But more important than the material success was the family that filled the ranch with life and laughter. Tobias had started school in the new town of Pleasant Valley, riding his pony the 8 miles each way with the lunch Penelope packed for him. Lily was already learning her letters from her mother and was eager to join her brother at school. In the evenings, the family would gather around the table for dinner, the children chattering about their day while Owen and Penelope exchanged amused glances. After dinner, Owen would read to the children or tell them stories while Penelope sewed or knitted. On Sundays, they attended church in Pleasant Valley, and afterward they would often have picnics with other families. The community had grown and thrived, and Owen and Penelope were respected members of it. One Sunday in the fall of 1889, after church, Penelope and Owen sat on a blanket watching their children play with other kids. Tobias was 5.5, Lily was 3.5, and the twins were toddling around trying to keep up with their older siblings. "You ever think about Kansas City?" Owen asked. "Do you miss it?" Penelope laughed. "Never. That life feels like it belonged to someone else. This is my real life, the one I was meant to have. I think about that advertisement sometimes, how desperate and lonely I was when I wrote it, how I had no idea what I was really asking for." "What did you think you were asking for?" "A housekeeper, I suppose. Someone to cook and clean and help with the work. Maybe eventually a mother for children if we were lucky." "And what did you get instead?" Owen looked at her, his heart full to bursting with love for this woman who had taken a chance on him. "I got you. I got love and partnership and a real family. I got everything I did not even know I was missing. You exceeded every hope I had, Penelope. Every single one." Penelope leaned over and kissed him, not caring who might see. "You gave me a home, Owen." You gave me purpose and love and these beautiful children. We built this together. We did. And we are not done yet. There is still so much to build, so much to look forward to." Like what? Watching Tobias take over the ranch someday, walking Lily down the aisle when she gets married, meeting our grandchildren, growing old together. That sounds perfect. They sat in companionable silence, watching their children play. The mountains rose in the distance, purple and gold in the autumn sun, just as beautiful as the day Penelope had first seen them. But now they were home, familiar and beloved. Tobias ran over, his face flushed with excitement. "Papa, can we go fishing at the creek, please?" "I think that is a fine idea. Go gather your sister and brothers." The children ran off to collect their siblings, and Owen helped Penelope to her feet. They walked hand in hand toward their waiting children, toward the wagon that would take them home to their ranch. That evening, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Owen and Penelope sat on the porch watching the stars come out. It was a clear night, and the Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of light. "I love you," Owen said, as he did every night. "I love you too," Penelope replied, as she did every night. It was a simple exchange, but it meant everything. It was the foundation of all they had built together, the bedrock beneath the ranch and the family and the life they shared. The years continued to pass. Tobias grew into a tall, capable young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. At 18, he was already managing much of the daily operation, allowing Owen to slow down a bit. Lily, at 16, was a beautiful young woman who had inherited her mother's skill with plants and animals. She kept a garden that was the envy of every woman in Pleasant Valley, and had a way with horses that amazed everyone who saw her work. The twins, Matthew and Mark, were 13 and inseparable. They were wild and reckless in the way of young boys, always getting into trouble but never anything serious. Owen saw himself in them, the restless energy that had driven him west all those years ago. In 1899, when Owen was 41 and Penelope was 38, they welcomed their fifth and final child, a daughter they named Rose. The pregnancy had been unexpected, and the birth had frightened Owen more than any of the others because Penelope was older now. But both mother and daughter came through healthy and strong. Tobias, home from helping a neighbor with his cattle, had looked at his baby sister with wonder. "I am 18 years old and an uncle would be about the same age," he had joked. "This is going to be confusing." But despite the age gap, the older children doted on their baby sister. Lily especially took Rose under her wing, caring for her like a little doll. The ranch continued to prosper. Owen had expanded to over 500 acres and had one of the largest herds in the county. But he had learned to balance work with family, to take time to enjoy the fruits of his labor. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Owen took Penelope to Helena for a week, leaving the children in Lily's capable care. They stayed in a fancy hotel, ate at restaurants, and even attended a theater performance. It was a luxury they rarely indulged in, and Penelope was as excited as a young girl. "This is wonderful," she said as they dressed for dinner one evening, "but I will be ready to go home in a few days. I miss the children and the ranch. So will I, but it is nice to have you all to myself for a little while." That evening, as they walked through the streets of Helena, Owen thought about how far they had come. 15 years ago, he had met a frightened young woman getting off a train, both of them taking a leap of faith into the unknown. Now they were partners in the truest sense, having built a life and a family together. "What are you thinking about?" Penelope asked, squeezing his hand. "About how that advertisement was the best thing I ever did, about how lucky I am that you answered it. We are both lucky. We found each other when we needed each other most." They returned home to chaos, Rose had gotten into the flour bin and was covered head to toe in white powder. The twins had tried to break a horse that was not ready and had ended up in the mud. Lily had burned dinner while trying to handle everything, and Tobias had lost a bet with one of the ranch hands and owed him a month's wages. Owen and Penelope looked at each other and burst out laughing. This was home, messy and chaotic and perfect. The new century arrived with celebration and hope. At the community gathering in Pleasant Valley, Owen stood with his arm around Penelope, watching their children dance and play. Tobias was courting the daughter of a neighboring rancher, and Owen suspected an engagement was not far off. Lily had suitors lining up, though she seemed in no hurry to settle down. The twins were still young, and Rose was toddling around, getting into everything. "What do you think the new century will bring?" Penelope asked. "Change, I am sure. It always does. But as long as we face it together, I am not worried." In 1901, Tobias married Sarah Mitchell in a ceremony held on the ranch. The whole county came to celebrate, and it was the biggest party the ranch had ever seen. Watching his son pledge his life to the woman he loved, Owen remembered his own wedding day, standing before a minister with a woman he barely knew, hoping they could make it work. "We did better than just make it work," Penelope whispered, as if reading his thoughts. "We built something beautiful." Tobias and Sarah built a house on the far end of the ranch property. And a year later, they made Owen and Penelope grandparents with the birth of a son they named Owen Thomas Lancaster, after both his grandfather and Sarah's father. Holding his grandson for the first time, Owen felt the circle complete. He had come to Montana alone and desperate, had built a homestead from nothing, and now he held his grandson in his arms. 3 generations of Lancasters on the land he had claimed. Lily married in 1903, choosing a teacher from Pleasant Valley named David Green. They moved into town, and Lily opened a shop selling her preserves and baked goods. She visited the ranch often, bringing her husband and eventually her children. The twins both chose to stay on the ranch, working alongside their father and brother. They proved to be natural cattlemen, and the ranch continued to grow under their management. By 1910, Owen was 52 and Penelope was 49. They had 6 grandchildren, with more on the way. The ranch employed 20 men and was one of the most successful operations in Montana. But more than the material success, they had a family that loved each other and worked together. On a warm summer evening, Owen and Penelope sat on the porch of the house that had grown from a simple cabin to a proper ranch house. Rose, now 11, was inside practicing piano. The twins were out with the cattle. Tobias and his family lived just over the hill. Lily was in town with her husband and children. "Did you ever imagine this?" Penelope asked. "When you wrote that advertisement, did you dream it could turn into this?" Owen took her hand, noting the age spots and work-worn skin that matched his own. "I dreamed of not being alone. I dreamed of having someone to share the work and the days. But this? A family, grandchildren, a thriving ranch, and a woman I love more now than I did 26 years ago. No, I never dared dream this big. Neither did I. When I got on that train in Kansas City, I was running away from pain and loneliness. I never imagined I was running toward such joy." They sat in silence as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. Inside, Rose's piano playing drifted through the open windows. A ranch hand called out to another, their voices carrying on the evening breeze. "I would do it all again," Owen said. "Every hard day, every struggle, every moment of fear, all of it just to end up here with you." "So would I." 1,000 times over. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Owen pulled Penelope close. They had built something lasting here, something that would continue long after they were gone. The land would pass to their children and their children's children. The Lancaster name would be part of Montana history. But more than that, they had built a love story. It had started with a desperate advertisement and a brave response. It had grown through hard work and harder times. It had deepened with each child, each challenge overcome together, each quiet evening on the porch. Owen had advertised for a wife, hoping for someone who could handle the isolation and the work. What he had gotten was a partner, a lover, a mother to his children and his dearest friend. Penelope had exceeded every hope he had dared to have, and given him dreams he had never known to hope for. As they sat together watching the night sky, their hands intertwined, they knew that their story had become part of the land itself. Future generations would walk these fields and live in this house, and perhaps they would know that it all started with one lonely homesteader's advertisement and one brave woman's response. The Wild West had been tamed, homesteads had become ranches, and rough cabins had grown into proper houses. But some things remained constant: the mountains, the stars, and the love that had built it all. Inside the house, the grandfather clock that Tobias had given them for their 20th anniversary chimed the hour. Rose finished her piano practice and called out to ask if they wanted tea. The evening breeze carried the scent of Penelope's roses, blooming in profusion around the porch. "Tea sounds lovely," Penelope called back, then looked at Owen with a smile. "Shall we go in?" "In a moment. I just want to sit here with you a little longer." So they sat. Two people who had taken a chance on each other all those years ago, who had built a life together from nothing but hope and hard work. The lonely homesteader and the woman who had exceeded every hope, still in love after all these years, still finding joy in the simple pleasure of sitting together as the day ended and night began. Their story, like the land they had claimed and the family they had built, would endure. And if anyone ever asked them the secret to their success, they would say it was simple. They had started with honesty, built on respect, and let it grow into love. Everything else had followed from that foundation. As the moon rose over the mountains and the stars filled the sky, Owen and Penelope finally went inside, hand in hand, ready to end another day and wake to another morning in the life they had built together. Their story was complete, but the legacy would continue, generation after generation, rooted in the love that had started with a single advertisement and a brave woman's response.